Hello, my name is Jorge Avila, and today I'm going to explain my work in backend in Java for information processing, part of the in Mexico program backend developer certification. This is the challenge 2 of this program, so let's start. Well, talking about the business summary, here we have the principal objective of this challenge, that is develops a Java-based desktop application to efficiently convert JSON to CSV file. The goal of this challenge is developing a backend application in Java to automate the process of integrating JSON files into CSV, and the impact that is change efficiency by reducing integration time and generating reports faster. The problem context at the beginning is that the businesses require a reliable tool to transfer JSON data to CSV for analysis and reporting. And the principal problems are that in this moment they are using manual conversion that improves the error prone due to human oversight. The relevance is that automating this process saves time, reduces errors, and supports data-driven decisions. Application with mapping and configuration is developed. Uh, they will handle JSON to CSV conversion, and they will improve usability and scalability for enterprise needs. Talking about the work that I make, here we here we have the backlog, and that it was divided in four parts: sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, and the final submission. And in the sprint 1 is all investigation, and the principal tasks were that investigate about the basic concepts of SCRUM methodology and know the characteristics of a JSON in a CSV file. And also in this sprint, I made the backlog of the challenge and the roadmap. The deliverables of this sprint was a PDF presentation of the investigation, and also the backlog and the roadmap in a PDF. Now for sprint 2, we have the mapping, configuration, and integration. In this sprint, I started coding and developed JSON reader and CSV writer classes using org.json and OpenCSV for dependencies. And I implement exception handling, example exception, JSON exception, and I run unit tests with JUnit 5, and I create two files, JSON reader test and CSV writer test. And in this sprint also I established a GitHub repository with README, organized files, and access permissions. And also I create branches using Git workflow, like the branch main, develop, and different branches for each feature, like CSV writer and JSON reader. And I submitted PRs for approval to the develop and before to the main branch. The deliverables of this sprint was a PDF evidence report with repository link and an initial JavaDoc. So for this sprint, I will show you the IntelliJ to see the code. The JSON code. Here we have the JSON reader class that it has a method that is a JSON array method, return a JSON array, is a read JSON file and receive the file path about parameters and throws exception and JSON exception. And this function only converts the JSON file into JSON array. Now we have the JSON reader test, that is the tests for JSON reader. And first we have a test that validate if it's a valid JSON, and receive a path and call to the function on the other class. And also if it's not null, the result, the JSON can be null. And principally this function can be fail because the JSON that I paste here is a valid JSON. Now we have the test for file not found, and so in this I write a path that doesn't exist, and this exception must be thrown because the file not found. And also we have this JSON file for invalid format. If you pass an invalid JSON, it's going to handle an exception and JSON an exception that is a JSON exception. And that the three tests for JSON reader. Now I'm going to show you the CSV writer. Here we have the CSV writer class that receive a string file path and the JSON array, that is the data, and this only convert with OpenCSV dependency to CSV. And now I'm going to show you the unit tests for CSV writer, and here we have the unit test. First, validate if the CSV file is valid. So here pass the JSON file, and only this convert to CSV, and validates if the file exists and the file size to validate the CSV that should not be empty. And here we have the string content, and finally this validate if the the content of the CSV file is this. And also another test is about file permission, if the user has permission to write into that file path. And finally, I create a method that validates if the operating system is Windows or if it's Linux or Mac OS. Now let's go with the sprint 3 about this challenge, that is mapping, configuration, and integration. And this sprint, the principal tasks were develop JSON CSV converter for dynamic JSON to CSV mapping, and minimized main Java, and change with config manager for configuration file names delimiters via config.properties. In this task I use the dependency name properties or command like args, and added the JSON CSV converter test and resolve integration issues, and also updated GitHub repository with revised readme, new classes, and config. Deliverables for this sprint were a PDF repository report with repository link, and let's see the code. Well, here we have our JSON CSV converter class. In this class, I create an interface converter that is only called the convert function that is on the main class. Now, here receives JSON array and throws JSON exception. So here we have the JSON CSV converter. And here we have the method that is a string array of 2 dimensions, and dynamically detects unique case as a headers. So this convert receive a JSON array and throws JSON exception. So in the first line we have an information print, and also if a JSON array is empty, this function is going to return a empty string. Here we create a new variable that is a hashed to store all the keys, and here iterates about the JSON array to read all the keys that is into the JSON array. So in another, we store that keys into a string array of 1 dimension that is called headers. Now I create a list of strings arrays that is a data list and is a new array list. In this list, and in the first space of this list, I store all the headers that I read before about the JSON file. This is only for the book. This line is only for the book, and here we have the read of each data of each header, and add to the list, to the principal list, that is data list. And also in this function, return the data list to array of new string of 2 dimensions that have the headers and the content. And that's all for this class. Now we have the test for this class that is only checks, and here we have to test the principally test if JSON file is a valid JSON, and here we have a JSON example, and also convert and validates if the CSV is a valid CSV using the function assert equals of JUnit5, and here validates if it's an empty JSON, and that's all. And also in this sprint, I create a config manager and a config properties. Here in the config manager, I establish 4 variables. First, the config file, the default input file, the default output file, and the default delimiter. This using the dependency of the library properties of Java util. And here we have a static method that launch at the beginning of the application only one time, and this only loads the config file or validates if the config file exists, and if it doesn't exist, it's going to use the default configuration that I create here. And here we have the getters, only the getters of these variables. Now here we have our config.properties file that establish if you want another delimiter or something that you want, or if you want to change the name of the files of input file and output file, and also that. And finally, here we have our main class. Our main class only initialize the dependencies of our JSON reader, our JSON CSV converter, and our config manager, and also our CSV writer, and receive the configuration about the config manager and get the input path about the throw arguments, and also the output path. That is the class that I showed you before. And here we set the delimiter. We get the delimiter about the config file also. And here only we have a try section that create a JSON array, read the JSON file that we passed about the config file, and create a string of 2 dimensions to store the CSV data using the converter. And also finally we write that string of that 2-dimensional string using the method that write CSV file. We send the parameter the output file and the CSV data that is this string. And here we have the book print, and also if here doesn't work, it's going to catch an exception, a new exception or JSON exception. That is the exceptions that I use for this challenge. And that's all about the code. Of this backlog, we have the final submission that is prepared this executive presentation for accomplished work, and the variables were is our PDF presentation and MP4 video presentation. And here we have the roadmap that I follow for this challenge. The general objective of this roadmap is to develop a Java application that converts JSON to CSV files. And here we have the roadmap divided into the 4 parts: Sprint 1, Sprint 2, Sprint 3, and the final submission. And the, the key task of this of each sprint and of each part of this challenge, and also the deadlines of this challenge. And the evaluation criteria for this challenge first was the satisfaction, achieve learning goals in Java development, Git workflows, and documentation using JavaDoc, and also the scope, encompass environment setup, core conversions, mapping, configuration, and version control, and also the innovation, leverage solid principles, JavaDoc, and a configurable config manager design. The solution of the challenge was to follow a progressive GitHub workflow, repositories, branches, and PRs, and a functional application to convert JSON files to CSV with the select delimiter and with a config file, and clear documentation using JavaDoc. The conclusions of the challenge is successfully met objectives in Java development, configuration, and version control, also gain strong technical proficiency and confidence in Java and Git, and well prepared for real-world software development with scalable solutions. And recommendation for me for this in this spring is to still apply on solid principles and investigate more about this. So that's all for the challenge. Thank you for watching this video and see ya.